We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 33b. On the previous summit, the Gemara was dealing with a contradiction between our Mishnah and a Mishnah in Bechoros. In our Mishnah, the Mishnah says by Dinei Mamanis we're machzir and we always retry the case. And the Mishnah in Bechoros says on the contrary, when it comes to a situation of Dinei Mamanis, Masha Asa Asui, the ruling stands. And the Gemara in the previous summit gave a number of answers to this question from various Amoraim. And the Gemara now is in the middle of discussing Rav Chisda's answer to this question. Rav Chisda said that when the Mishnah in Bechoros says Masha Asa Asui, that the ruling stands, that is talking specifically in a situation of Natal V'nasan Biyad, where the judge actively actually took money from one party and gave it to the other party. In that case, the judge is responsible to compensate for the loss that he caused, but Masha Asa Asui, the ruling stands. And in our Mishnah, we're talking about a situation where it was not Natal V'nasan Biyad, the judge didn't actively take from one party to the other, the judge just issued a ruling, and in that situation, we do retry the case. And the Gemara in the previous Amud noted that this explanation is problematic in one direction, because in a situation where a judge says that the person is innocent, and that's the error, he should have said guilty, so what's the Natal V'nasan Biyad in that situation? If you're saying the Mishnah in Bechoros is talking about Natal V'nasan Biyad, the Mishnah in Bechoros also mentions a situation where the judge erroneously said the person is innocent. How do you have Natal V'nasan Biyad in that case? And the Gemara said, well, anytime the judge declares innocence, he says, Paterata, you're exempt, that is automatically Natal V'nasan Biyad. That was the Gemara's suggestion. But of course, that then creates a problem in our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah also talks about a case where the judge erroneously said innocent, and now you're saying that is Natal V'nasan Biyad, but in our Mishnah, it says that we do retry the case. And so the Gemara reinterpreted the Mishnah, that the Mishnah is not talking about a situation where the judge erroneously said innocent. In that case, actually, the Mishnah does not say we will retry the case. And the way you have to read the Mishnah is it's all talking about a situation where you're retrying a case because the judge originally erroneously said guilty. And when it says in the Mishnah, when it seems to imply that we're retrying a case by innocence, that's not really how you read it. What it just means is that we retry the case, and therefore the guilty party will now become innocent, and the innocent party will now become guilty. Now the problem is, if you're going to read the Mishnah in that fashion, that by Dinei Mamanis we're really only retrying the case in a situation where the judge originally issued an erroneous ruling of guilty, so then how do you read by Dinei Nefashos? Because the whole point of the Mishnah was to contrast Dinei Mamanis with Dinei Nefashos, that by Dinei Mamanis we retry the case and by Dinei Nefashos we do not. And so now the Gemara is focusing on that part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah by Dinei Nefashos said, Machzirin lezuchos, we will retry the case in order to make the person innocent. V'ein machzirin lechovan, we will not retry the case in order to make the person guilty. Now we can't read that as talking about both scenarios, because we've already said that the Mishnah by Dinei Mamanis is not talking about both scenarios. It's only talking about a scenario where originally the verdict was guilty and now we have to retry it for innocence. So if the Mishnah is only talking about that situation, how is that any different than when it comes to Dinei Nefashos? There also we only retry a case for innocence. And so that's what the Gemara now asks, Machzirin lezuchus, zuchus gredita. So you're going to have to understand that when it says in the Mishnah that we retry the case to make the person innocent, that's only talking about innocence, because there's no other parties in a Dinei Nefashos case. It's not like you have two parties where you're going to switch, the innocent becomes guilty and the guilty becomes innocent. It's Machzirin lezuchus, we're trying to make the guilty party innocent. V'ein Machzirin lechova. So then how do we read the next part of the Mishnah, which talks about the fact that we don't retry for guilt? That means lezuchus shehi chova. That means that we make the person innocent, but there's somebody who's going to be caused, who is going to be guilty because of that. That's not true. Chov say deman. Who exactly is going to be guilty? Again, we're just retrying the case in order to make the guilty person who we convicted and we said that he was liable to the death penalty, we're trying to make him innocent. There is no guilt in this situation, so that whole line of ein machzirin lechova doesn't make sense. And the Gemara continues, well, holo kasha, that's not difficult, because what we might mean is, chov say the goel hadam, that if we're going to say that the murderer is actually innocent, so then the goel hadam, it's going to be bad for the goel hadam, because he wants to kill this person, and now he won't be able to. But the Gemara says, one second, mishum chov say the goel hadam, because of the chov of the goel hadam, why would that be relevant? Do you think we would care about the chov of the goel hadam, therefore katlinan leilahai, therefore we're going to kill this innocent person, we'll kill an innocent person because the goel hadam loses out? That doesn't even make any sense. V'yod, further, my bain, it doesn't even read in the Mishnah, because the way the Mishnah phrases it is bain, a situation of zechus, bain, a situation of chova. It sounds like two separate cases, and now we're interpreting that it's really all one case. We're saying that when the Mishnah is saying by Dinei Mamanis that we retry the case, it's really only retry the case when we first erroneously said guilty and now we're trying to do innocent. So why are you saying bain lezechus, bain lechova? It's only going to be in one direction. And so the Gemara says to that kasha, that is indeed difficult. And Rashi explains, Zechus Geredita, again, will retry a capital case when it only involves innocence. She's Zechus lo, meaning it's a situation where it's a merit for him, he's going to be declared innocent. Ve'ena chova lebaldino, it's not going to be a liability for any other litigant. Kagon chil Shabbos, so Ish, for example, the guy was Mechal Shabbos, or you have a situation of adultery. In those situations, you may have originally said the person is liable to the death penalty, and now you're undoing it, so we'll retry the case for Zechus. Ve'en machzir and lechova, now how do you interpret the next part of the Mishnah, which says that we're not going to retry the case by a capital case in order to make him guilty? You'll have to say it means lezechus sheichov. You'll have to say it really means to make him innocent if there is some guilt for some other party. That's the only way to explain it. Because you can't say that the Mishnah means we're not going to retry a case for guilt by a capital case. Because we just said that by dine mamanis, according to this answer, also we will not retry the case lechova. And the reason is, again, we're not going to retry the case lechova because we've said, according to the answer of Rav Chisda, that when they originally say paterata, that is the equivalent of natal v'nasan biyad. When they say you're exempt, when they say you're innocent by dinei mamanis, that's the same as if the judge actively took the money from one party to the other, in which case we say that we do not retry the case. So how are we going to interpret the dinei nefashos of lechova lezechus shehi chova? What's the chova over here? And the Gemara suggests chov say the goel hadam. Well, maybe you'll say we're talking about the obligation of the goel hadam. It means we're not going to retry the case if it's bad for the goel hadam. Shekasha be'enov shezen nitzel, because it's difficult in the goel hadam's eyes that this guy should be saved. But that doesn't make sense either, as the Gemara says, because of the chov say the goel hadam. Just because the goel hadam doesn't like it, therefore we're going to say this guy, we're going to put this guy to death and not retry the case. That wouldn't make any sense. And furthermore, bain, what does it mean in the Mishnah when it says whether lezechus, whether lechova? Katani bereisha, bain lezechus, bain lechova. It says that we retry the case by dinei mamanis, whether zechus or whether chova. Al matarti mili katani. You see, we're talking about two separate things. Veleka lefrusha lezechus sheichova. You can't possibly explain that it means zechus, which is a chova for the other party. And the Gemara continues, Ravina says, and Rashi will explain that Ravina is supporting Rav Chisda's answer. Again, one of the questions on Rav Chisda's answer was that if Rav Chisda is going to say that the Mishnah in Bechoros is talking about natal v'nasan biyad, and that's why we do not retry the case, but how does that work in a situation where the judge erroneously issued a ruling that the person is innocent? That doesn't seem to be natal v'nasan biyad. Now, the Gemara originally answered that automatically when you say innocent, that is natal v'nasan biyad, because pater ata is the same thing as natal v'nasan biyad. But the Gemara, as we saw above, does not like that answer because it does not fit with our Mishnah here in Sanhedrin. And so therefore Ravina says, no, you could have a situation where a judge erroneously issues a ruling of innocent, and it is actually natal v'nasan biyad, kagon shahaya lo biyado mashkon, because the case could be where the person is holding a collateral, v'natalu mimenu, and so then the judge takes away the collateral, so he actually is taking something from one party to the other, even though he is saying that the person does not have to pay. In this case, let's say, for example, a borrower does not have to pay. He could still be taking from the lender and giving to the borrower if the lender was holding collateral. And similarly, time asatar, you could have a case where the judge says that something that is pure is impure, which would be da'agi be'sheretz. He actually actively touched the sheretz to the pure, and therefore, again, that's like natal v'nasan biyad. And tiras hatam, you could also have where he made something impure pure, she'irvan bein peirosav. He took something that was impure and he threw it, he mixed it up with other produce. He was trying to demonstrate that it's actually pure, but again, it actually was impure. Those could all be cases of natal v'nasan biyad, and so then we would simply answer, again, the Mishnah in Bechoros is talking about natal v'nasan biyad, and so the judge is responsible, and we do not retry the case. But our Mishnah, where we do retry the case, that's talking where it was not natal v'nasan biyad. And Rashi explains, Ravina mahadr le'ukmei le'terutze de Rav Chisda. Ravina is supporting the answer of Rav Chisda. The masnisin kishalo nasa v'nasan biyad. Again, our Mishnah is when the judge doesn't actively take money from one party and give it to the other. V'danas adin, and the Mishnah of danas adin, which is in Bechoros, kishanasa v'nasan biyad. That's when he actively takes from one party and gives to the other. U'dekasha loch ziko es hachayev my nasa v'nasan biyadika. And your question was, in a case where the judge erroneously said someone guilty is innocent, where is the nasa v'nasan biyad? Kagon shayalo mashkon and litoveya min hanitzva. Let's say he is holding a collateral, and the judge says to the borrower, you're exempt, and and he takes the collateral from the lender and gives it to the borrower. And timei asatar, let's say he makes something pure impure. Nami mashkachas la, there also we can have a case. Kishanasa v'nasan biyad, did naga b'hu sheretz, he actually touches the items with a sheretz. He touches the items with a creature that's tamei. Kishaboli shalafanav al dvar safek, the nola lo b'tarosav yamar lo hadayin tamei saying, when the judge says this stuff is tamei, v'nad al sheretz v'hishlech aleim shlo yehud safek b'davar, he then takes the sheretz and throws it on them, so there should be no doubt. V'hein lo hayu ela taoros, and in fact they actually were pure. And the same thing by tiras atami, the same thing when he makes something that's tamei tar, v'nad lo hadayin atzmo v'irvonim shar peiros shal nishal, the judge actually takes the fruits, he mixes them up with the other produce of the person that the question was asked about. V'nimsa shatav harei akol tamei, it turned out he made a mistake, and the whole thing was actually tamei. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Dinei nefashos, when it comes to capital cases, and the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Minayin liyotze mi bezdin chayev. From where do we know that if a person leaves the court and he leaves the court liable, V'yamar echad, and one person says, Yesh li lelamed olav zchus, I have a reason why the person is actually innocent, Minayin shemechzir, no, so from where do we know that we bring the person back and we retry the case? Talmud over the pasuk says, Naki al tarog, we should not kill the innocent. Uminayin liyotze mi bezdin Zaka, and from where do we know, let's say the person leaves in a capital case, he leaves innocent. V'yamar echad yeshli l'lamed olav chova, and a person says, I can find the reason why he's guilty. Minayin shein machzirno, so from where do we know we don't retry the case? Talmud lomar, tzaddik al tarog, it says you don't kill the tzaddik, you don't kill the righteous. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Shimi Barashi says, v'chilufa l'meses, it's exactly the opposite when it comes to a meses, somebody who incites others to worship avodah zarah. There actually we try to find the reason for guilt. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, you can't have mercy, and you cannot cover for him. And the Gemara continues, Rav Kahana Masni, Rav Kahana taught as follows, Mi kiharog targenu, we learn it from the pasuk of kiharog targenu, that also is a pasuk by a meses, we should surely kill him. And the Gemara continues, Boy minei Rabbi Zeira mir Rav Sheshes, Rabbi Zeira asked Rav Sheshes the following question, Chayve Golius mai, what would be by Chayve Golius? Rashi explains, Chayve Golius mai mi have kedin nefashos ilo, is that like din nefashos, where again we're retrying the case only for innocence? And the Gemara says to that, Asya rotzeach, that we learn, Gzeira shava rotzeach, it is the same as din nefashos. And Chayve Malkius mai, what about a situation of Chayve Malkius, of lashes, is that the same? And the Gemara says, Asya Rasha, that is the same. We learned that out from Gzeira shava of Rasha. Tanya nami hachi, we have a brisa like this as well, Chayve Golius minayin, from where do we know Chayve Golius, that it's the same? Asya rotzeach, we learn Gzeira shava rotzeach. Chayve Malkus minayin, where do we know by Chayve Malkus? Asya Rasha, we have a Gezeira Shava of Rasha. And Rashi says, Ksiv b'chayve misos, it says by chayve misos, by capital cases, you must harotzeach. It uses the word rotzeach. Ksiv b'chayve golus, lonas shama rotzeach, it also uses the word rotzeach by golus. And Rasha, again, that's by Malkus. Ksiv b'din nefashos hasho Rasha lamos, by din nefashos it says Rasha. Ksiv b'chayve Malkus, v'hayem bin hakosa Rasha, it uses the word Rasha by lashes as well. Tanya nami hachi, b'tosefta Tanya, in the Tosefta we learn, when we talk about the fact again that we will retry the case for innocence, this same idea of learning out the same halacha by Chayve Golius and Chayve Malkius. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, when it comes to capital cases, we do not retry the case in order to make the person guilty. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, V'hu shata b'davar shein hatzedukin modin bo. That's only true if the mistake was something that the tzedukin do not admit to. Avol ta b'davar shatzedukin modin bo. But if the mistake is made in something that even the tzedukin, that they agree to, that it's mefurish in the Torah, if that was the mistake, so zil kari be'rav, so go, you should study by the school where the children study, Zil Kari Be'Ravu. That's something that is such an obvious mistake that we actually would retry, even if it means making the person guilty. And Rashi explains, Davar shein hatzedukin modin bo she'ein ta'usa mefurash b'Torah. If his mistake is not explicit in the Torah, behedya again explicitly, ela b'mishno b'divrei hamoraim. If the mistake was in a Mishnah or in the words of the Amoraim, then we don't retry for guilt. But if it's right there in the pasuk, Zil Kari Be'Ravu tinoko shel beis Ravan yodin she'ein oklam, even the school children know that that's nothing v'hadar, and that kind of case we would retry. And the Gemara continues, Boy minei Rav Chia bar Abba me Rav Yochanan. Rav Chia bar Abba asked Rav Yochanan the following question, Ta bin noef v'no efes ma, what if he makes a mistake in terms of an adulterer, an adulteress? Rashi explains, Ta bin noef v'no efes, zicha mehen mi'aminan mahadrinan le'lechova. In such a situation, let's say he said they were innocent, would we retry that case for guilt? Rashi explains, I understand by a murder there's a lot of areas you can make a mistake. So that are not explained explicitly. For example, he says that the stone that was used to kill wasn't enough to kill. He was warned by the person being killed, not by the witnesses. Or he says he was chasing me and he could have saved himself by getting at one of his limbs and not by killing him. Instead, he killed him. When it comes to a noef and noefes, when it comes to a situation of adultery, there really are not legitimate mistakes you can make to say that the person is innocent. So maybe over there, when a mistake is made and they say they're innocent, maybe in that situation we would say that we retry the case for guilt. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said back to him, Ademokdach yakid, while your fire is burning, zil kotes karcha, go and cut your squash, vitzali, and you should roast it. And Rashi explains, Ademokdach yakid kotes karcha vitzali, ba'od sheish do lekes kotzitz deluin shel chavitzalo, son, again, while your fire is burning, cut the squash and roast it. Kilomer, what it means is as follows. Be'od shata osek b'shmaitcha, while you're learning this sugya, tein leiv lahavin lahosef lekach, you have to pay attention, and you have to add if you're able to add. Harei shamatami many you just heard me say that if the person makes a mistake, that's an easy mistake, that even the tzedukin admit to, that we retry the case even for guilt. This is exactly an example of that. This is a mistake that the tzedukin admit to, and so therefore, yes, in this situation, by a noef and noefes, we would retry the case even for guilt. And the Gemara says, Itmar Nami was stated as well, Amar Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Ami says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ta ben noef, if a mistake is made by the adulterer, choser, we would retry the case even for guilt. And the Gemara says, Elahechi dami ein chosrin. Well, what would be a situation where we would not retry the case? Amar Rabbi Avo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Avo says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Kagon shata shelo kedarka. Let's say the mistake was made, that the adultery was done, but it was an act of relations that was not the normal way of relations. In that kind of a mistake, there we would not retry the case. And Rashi explains, Elahechi dami in chosrin, what would be an example of a case where we would not retry the case for guilt, again, by arayas, to katani masnisin stam, dina nefashas ein machzirin lechova. Because it says in our Mishnah that by capital cases, we don't retry lechova, we don't retry for guilt. Ve'arayos nami v'mashma. Arayas also seems to be implied, so there must be a case of arayas that we don't retry. What kind of mistake is not an obvious mistake? Kegon shata hadayin v'zika benoif v'noefes shelo kedarka. Let's say you had a situation where the judge made a mistake and he said innocent, because the adulterer and the adulteress, they had relations, shalo kedarka, they had relations in the abnormal fashion. There, the chiyuv is not explicit. The rabbanan yalfila. It's actually learned out by the rabbanan, mi mishkavei isha. It says mishkavei, it's plural, shnei mishkavos. That means two kinds of lying together. Again, it means whether it's kedarka, the normal fashion, or shalo kedarka, let's say it's anal. Ve'en hatzidukin modin bo. In that situation, the tzidukin do not admit, that's learned from a drasha, that already is a mistake. That's not just an obvious mistake, and therefore we would not retry the case for guilt in that situation. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Dinei mamanis hakol v'chulu. It said by monetary cases, so anyone is able to give reasons for innocence or guilt, but when it comes to dinei nefashos, they can only give reasons for innocence, but not for guilt. And the Gemara says hakol, when you're saying anyone is able to offer a reason, v'afilu edem, are you saying even the witnesses, meaning even the witnesses besides their testimony, they're able to give reasons why the person should be innocent? Name masnisan Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, v'lo Rabbanan. Let us say that our Mishnah is following Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and not the Rabbanan. It's only Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda that says that the witnesses are able to say anything other than their testimony. The Tanya, because we learned in a brayso, ve'ed echad lo yana b'nefesh bein lezachus bein lechov. It says that an eid echad, a witness, is not able to say anything. The Tana Kama says can't say anything at all, whether for innocence or for guilt. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda says ona lezachus, the witness is allowed to say reasons why the person is innocent. Ve'in ona lechova, but he cannot say reasons why the person is guilty. And so therefore, it seems like our Mishnah is following the minority opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara says, Amar Papa says, Bi'echad min hatalmidim v'divrei hakol. This Mishnah has nothing to do with the witnesses. We're talking about one of the students. He's not an actual judge. He's one of the students that's sitting by the case. So in that situation, by Dinei Mamanis, the students can say things whether for innocence or whether for guilt. But when it comes to Dinei Nefashos, they can only suggest reasons why the person is innocent. And Rashi explains, Hakol va'afilo edem shayidu olav, even the witnesses who testified about him, Yechol nelamed olav rayos shel zechus, they can bring evidence that the person is innocent. Amar Rav Papa says, Hakol dem asnisim leisuye talmidim hayoshvin shuros lefnei hadayonin kamar. Our Mishnah, when it says everyone, it's talking about the students who are sitting in rows in front of the judges. The malamdin zechus, they can teach reasons for innocence. Ve'in malamdin chova, they cannot teach reasons for guilt. V'divrei hakol, and therefore it would follow everyone, meaning not only Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, it would follow the Tanakama of the Brisa as well. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Dalid Amud Aleph.